everybody. Welcome to art history for this week. So now that it's summertime, we're gonna switch up what we've been working on. So I know in previous studies, we were working on a specific artist each week. And while we may still talk about some of those artists and incorporate them into our learning, we are gonna focus on projects during the summer. So what we've got going on this week is a focus on sculptures. And so let's go ahead and get started with our prayer, and then we'll move right into reading our book on sculptures. So fold your hands. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for allowing us to learn together. Thank you for the ability to make and create things that remind us of you. Amen. Perfect. So Ms. Jenny lent me the book called Look at Sculpture, which is a look at sculptures through the eyes of some itty bitty mice. All right. One afternoon, 3 tiny mice came out of their tiny mouse house. They climbed up onto the long table Mrs. Bigley used for her desk. Alexander and Kat spied a card. Alexander read, "Celebrate sculpture at the museum." And this sculpture here is called 4 Rectangles with Oblique Circles by Barbara Hepworth. So off they went. Do you see the mice? You see where they went? Yep, they're in the back of that lady's bike basket. And then where does that look like they got to? What do you think? I think it looks like an art museum. When the mice got to the museum, they hid behind a broom and bucket until the building closed for the night. Then they tiptoed into the gallery. "Look," said Alexander, "stars." So this type of sculpture is called an assemblage because it's got a lot of little pieces all assembled together. Can you see that? And then this type of sculpture is called a totem. And totems typically show animal faces, and you can see some faces there. This is a statue. They just refer to it as a statue. And then Kiki says, "Look, one that moves." Kiki's talking about this one up here. Now that's called a mobile, and you maybe would have had one above your bed when you were a baby. Now this one right here, when it is a statue or a sculpture of just someone's head, that is called a bust. Okay? And so what do you think that one would be called? A bust. It's the same, right? It's a bust. "There it is," they whispered. "The sculpture from the invitation." They scooched up the pedestal. "2 shapes are short and 2 are tall," said Kat. "It's bigger than we are," said Kiki. "It's made of slate. It must be very heavy," said Alexander. What do you think slate is? Does anybody know what slate is? It's a kind of rock. So do you think rock would be heavy? Yeah, I would make it heavy. "And I see spaces between the shapes." And Kat said, "I see spaces in the shapes." Kiki said, "I see 4 smooth, shiny crescent moon shapes." She's talking about these in-between parts. They look like crescent moons. "Let's look some more." So they clasped their hands behind their back. Let's do that. Can you put your hands behind your back? Good. And they did a museum walk around the sculpture. So sometimes when we're in museums and we're looking at art, we may walk around with our hands behind our backs and look. Maybe we have our hands on our hips and look. And maybe you even put your hand up to your face. Can you give me a good thinking face? Let's see your thinking face. Good. They looked at the sides, they looked at the back, and they looked at the front. It feels like a forest, said Kat. I think it's a family, said Kiki. There's holes like there are portholes on a boat. So he kind of felt like it looked like a boat maybe. See, he's peeking through. Let's sketch. They took pencils and pads out of their packs. They started drawing. Let's add to our sketches, said Kiki. See all their sketches there? She drew more lines and added some shading. Alexander and Kat did too. Now our sketches don't look flat, said Kat. The sketches look 3D, they squeaked. Just like the sculpture is. 3D, Kat said again. What if we each make a clay sculpture? So they reached into their packs and pulled out clay. One standing alone, said Kat. Look, said Alexander, mine with yours. They're saying hello. Now it's a group sculpture, and mine looks good enough to eat. What does that one look like, you think? Cheese? Because they're mice? And I'll make one more, said Kiki, and then we'll have 4. What if, said Alexander, we add to the 4th one? Alexander worked on the front, and he made squiggles. Kiki worked on the back, and she made bumps. And Kat worked on the sides, and she did X's on her side. They looked at what they had created, and then Kat said, let's take turns arranging them. Ta-da, said Kat. See, she arranged them like that. When I put them this way, said Kiki, the yellow one looks lonely because he's off by himself. Look at them this way, said Alexander. He stacked his. Whoa, said Kat. Does that one kind of look like a person? This way feels like music, said Alexander, because it goes dum, dee, see? It moves like music moves. Now they look like they're dancing, said Kiki. What if, said Alexander, we make shapes that look like the holes? Let's cut one in half, said Kat. Let's roll out the other, said Kiki, and put some shapes together. Look, they squealed. What does that look like? That kind of looks like a mouse. Suddenly, they heard footsteps. They had just enough time to pack up, climb down, and scamper out the entrance door before it was the people's turn to look at sculpture. And then there they are. They're on their way back home. Who did they catch a ride with? Who does that look like? The mailman. So, a sculpture, we've learned that word before. We sometimes call it a statue, right? And what do you think you can make sculptures out of? Let's think. Think. Do you think you could make one out of clay? Yeah. Could you make one out of sand? Think so. Sometimes they're made out of metal. There's a lot of different things you can use to make a sculpture. So this week, what I'd like you to work on is I want you to make a sculpture at home, okay? And you can either make that with clay and then bake it. That's what we did at school. Or some of the students at school did pipe cleaners and then they used aluminum foil over it I saw a really slithery snake made out of that. And you could do one outside in your sandbox. You make a sandcastle, that's a kind of sculpture. So there's lots of different materials you could use, but I want you to work on that this week. So get your hands dirty, really work with something, okay? And I will see you guys soon. Bye.